Hello, here we are in the last film of this series about the history of runes and runic magic. My name is Alban from NORTHAN Viking Silver, and today I just want to look at a few outstanding examples of magical runes. So to start off with, in Romania was found a heavy golden neck ring, actually 4 golden neck rings, and one of them had a runic inscription very clearly marked in the middle. The runes read Gutanio Wych Heilig, which means belonging to the gods, sacred object, holy. Now we know that the Germanic peoples used oath rings to swear oaths on. We also know from other written sources that the temples had holy rings in that were sprinkled with sacrificial blood. So could this ring found in Romania actually be a holy sacred ring, neck ring of the Goths? Maybe. And then some even more outstanding golden objects found are the 2 horns found from Galahus in Denmark. Let me show you a picture of them. There are these huge golden horns covered with amazing mythical figures, and one of them around the rim had a runic inscription. Now these runes can be translated I, Hlewigast from the Holt, dedicated the horn. Now if you think about it, this has 3 of the elements of the 5 elements that indicate that something has magical significance. So it has a naming phrase, it describes the object, and then it has a power word, in this case Tawido, I dedicated. So if that's the case, then these runes make the horns a sacred object, and then they become something suitable for using in ritual practice. Now I want to look at a few unusual runestones. Runes, by the way, we do have some inscriptions on things that are set down to curse a potential thief. In other words, to dissuade someone from stealing something. So for instance, there's a set of merchant scales found with an inscription on that curses anyone who steals them. And we have something like this on some runestones. There are some stones that were found in 9th century Denmark and southern Sweden. They have the usual message that such and such set them up in memory of so and so. Then at the end of the inscription comes the words, "May whoever damages this stone or drags it away from here become a warlock." Or one of them says, "a warlock and a perverted woman." Now, remember that the Vikings had 2 kinds of magic. One is Gauder, chanted magic, and the other was the secretive magic of witches, Seidr. And any man who practiced this magic, that is a warlock, was looked down upon and looked askance upon, because this kind of witchcraft obviously involved some kind of sexual practice that at that time was considered dishonourable for a man. So that's why the curse on these runestones actually says that someone will become a warlock. In fact, one of the runestones has an even stronger worded ending. Seithir och Sethratis armana as othi mini thvi. Fucked and a warlock, the man who destroys this memorial. No mincing of words there. But runestones were usually set up where people could see them because they're statements of public record. But there are a few stones found that are actually buried in the ground and were not intended to be seen by people at all. So for instance, there's one from Kulver in Gotland from the 5th century. It's buried in a grave. It has a futhark carved on it, which is usually a sign that it's meant to have a magical effect. It also has one of these pine tree symbols, which were magical symbols, and it has a power word, Seus. We're not sure what this means, but it seems pretty likely that this stone was put in the grave for a purpose. Now remember that the Vikings believed that it was possible for a corpse to rise from the grave and to trouble the living. They called these creatures draugir. And a draugr, as we know it from sources in the sagas, could come out of the grave at night and attack people. So could the use of this stone be to actually keep the corpse in its grave. There's another stone from Norway, from Egja, also buried face down in the grave. It's got a long inscription, it's quite difficult to read, but one part of it goes like this. This stone has not been struck by the sun. It has not been scored by the knife. No man shall lay it bare while the moon wanes, neither shall a man lay this stone aside. This thing is sprinkled with blood, alu, against the committer of evil. So this seems pretty clear that it's an invocation, using that old word alu, against the committer of evil, the man lying in the grave, to keep him there. Well, that brings me to the end of this series of films. Just to sum up the history of runes and runic magic, you can see that, even though this is a very quick tour through Germanic beliefs, you can see that the use of runes changed as the culture itself changed. They were used over 1,000 years throughout many different countries. So the earlier inscriptions are pretty terse with a lot of abbreviations, and they seem to reflect Etruscan cultic practices. It's notable that Roman magic was quite different, using types of curses and binding spells that are not reflected in the early runic inscriptions. So the Romans weren't influencing those type of amulets, but the bracteates were based on Roman prototypes. But they soon developed their own forms, showing the independence of the native tradition. Whatever the origins of runes and runic magic, the Germanic people made them very much their own. So at the end of the migration period, this tradition develops. Gnostic elements come in, Christian elements come in, and the inscriptions become longer. And then the older power words and abbreviations fall out of use. Then runic tradition dies out in most countries, except for Scandinavia, where it continues and expands. Here too, things develop. So Christian blessings come in as part of runic practice, and the later runic texts get into the world of medieval leechcraft or Christian mysticism, and eventually even to the realms of black magic. In other words, runic magic changed as culture changed. And the same thing happened after the reinvention of the runes in the 17th century. The antiquarians took an interest in it. There was this revival of interest in all things northern, and the use of runes was reinvented, and it continued to reflect the surrounding culture. So in the 17th century, we have the guy who first started it off, Johannes Boreas. He invented the Adal rune, and his beliefs were based on his interest in Hermeticism. And then runes expanded and developed. They went through the racist theories and occultism of the 19th century into the early 20th century. And then the late 20th century, they got into the esoteric world and the world of the New Age. And then right up to our modern day, we have runic yoga. So as culture changes, the use of runes changes. In fact, you could say that runes continue to reflect society, and they continue to fascinate. In fact, they're still alive and kicking. So, if you want to know more, these films are just meant to whet your appetite. Maybe they're enough for some people, but other people may want to do their own research, or they may question or disbelieve what I'm saying. Well, good, because the history of the runes is subjective, particularly the interpretation of the inscriptions. Don't forget that first law of runodynamics. So, if you want to do your own research, these are the books I would recommend. They've been very helpful to me. First one is like a general introduction to runes, the history of runes. It's great, by Martin Findle. This is a British Museum publication. It's got great pictures in as well. The book that's really been helpful to me is this. It has all the material gathered together in one book and discussed in depth. And these are the people, MacLeod and Bernard Meese, who come up with a theory of the Etruscan influence on the early inscriptions. Really interesting book. This is a good introductory book by Ray Page on runes. And then this book here gathers together all the magical inscriptions and discusses them in depth by my old tutor John McKinnell and Rudy Simek. It's always good to have a translation of Egil Saga. This is a really good one by Christine Fell. And these books are great dictionaries of mythology because it's really good if you want to follow up any ideas. You'll find a lot of good information in here. And then I've also used dictionaries, Old Icelandic Dictionary by Cleesby Vigfusson, the Oxford Dictionary, Dictionary of Medieval English, and also Dictionary of Scots Dialect. Very useful when trying to follow up the idea of casting the runes and casting the cavils. My edition of Hávamál was the one by Martin Clark, which also includes Sigurdrifumal. But something else that's really good, this is a book, someone's put a scan of it online. I actually had it in the library at university, Corpus Poeticum Boreale. It gathers together all the ancient northern poetry up until the 13th century in one volume, with the texts in the original Old Norse, so you can compare the Old Norse words with the translation. And if you don't get hold of that book, this is a really useful website online because they also have the original Norse texts alongside a translation of a lot of the old poems, not just Völuspá. And Wikipedia proved invaluable, really interesting. You know, I suggest just go to the Runic magic section and follow the links, and there are so many interesting rabbit holes. It's really great. Obviously, I have a deep fascination for runes and their history, and I just would like to mention that I've used some of these inscriptions in the jewellery that I've made. You can see that on the NORTHAN website. And I'll publish a script of this film so that you can read through what I've been saying and check it out for yourselves. I'm not quite sure where it's going to go yet, so I suggest looking at the NORTHAN website or the NORTHAN Facebook page and see if you can find a link to it there. Otherwise, just remains to say, if you've enjoyed these films, please press like and share.